For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. The Cyber Justice Laboratory is a research center that explores the interplay between new technologies and the law. We are currently conducting the project Autonomy for Cyber Justice Technologies, funded by the competition of the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Our project brings together more than 50 researchers and 45 partners dedicated to the use of technology and artificial intelligence for the prevention and resolution of the conflict. Over the coming weeks, the Cyber Justice Lab will be hosting a series of online activities that will gather the opinion and experience of legal experts from around the world on the recent event, from ethical issues to crisis management, including analysis of the achievement and failure of technology shift in the legal side. The laboratory will present variant and relevant content. Stay tuned by checking our social network and visiting our website at cyberjustice.ca. For today's webinar, we welcome Xavier Beauchamp-Tremblay, President and CEO of CanLII, and Frédéric Pelletier, VP Legal Information Lexum and Head Editor of CanLII. We will start by the presentation of CanLII new improvement version of its Noteup technology. Xavier, over to you.
Welcome to the webinar. I've been properly introduced, so I'm going to jump right away in the middle of the subject with just two warnings to start. The first one is that confinement means that there are kids in this house. They are not in the basement. They have been warned to behave, but they may yell. And I have my dog right next to me. He wouldn't go elsewhere. So there are some barking chances over the course of this presentation, which I hope won't be too disruptive to you. The Cyber Justice Lab has such an international reach that, frankly, I wasn't sure that just about everybody who would register for the webinar would know what CanLII is. So I'll take 30 seconds with apologies to those who are very familiar with CanLII to just talk about us. So CanLII stands for the Canadian Legal Information Institute. It was founded in 2001. And we provide free access to law, and you can discuss forever what free means in that particular expression, but just for the purpose of today's presentation, it means no paywall. So when you go on our website, canli.org, this is exactly what you see. So behind the little post-it, you get right away to a website where you can run a search for legal information. CanLII is very much used by the legal profession in Canada, as well as legal academia, according to varying surveys over the years. Like there is like 9 out of 10 lawyers in the country who say that they use CanLII. So really a legal research engine that is used regularly in practice for people in Canada. Today we're going to talk about a citator, and the title of the presentation mentions noting up, so building a Noteup feature at CanLII. So just to get the semantics right, the citator is a feature that notes up cases, and I'll be the one in charge. I should have said that very early, of setting the table, and the most interesting part of the presentation will come in the second part, where Frédéric will be there and show you a little bit of what's under the hood. So I'm there to show you the car from the outside, what it looks, what it does, and why we built it, and Frédéric will show you exactly we'll show you under the hood how it was built and the features. So a citator is a feature that notes up cases, and for the presentation today, I'll take again 2 minutes to explain what we mean by note up. So let's say you have a case X. Case X, if it's just unless it's a very routine matter, there is a fair chance that it's going to cite previous cases. So in that example, cases A, B, and C. And the citator's job is to go through the text using software of case X and identify all of these citations whenever the reference or the title of one of these cases is mentioned in the text of case X. In technical language, this is called parsing text. And whenever we identify one such references to previous cases, the citator's job is to add these little hyperlinks to cases A, B, and C, so that when you're browsing the CanLII collection, instead of just seeing a collection of individual documents, you can browse it just the same way you would browse the internet. The same thing works on the other side too, i.e. after case X was issued, it's likely if it was of at least minimal interest from a precedential standpoint, it's going to be cited by other cases, in that case D, E, and F. And again, the citator's job would be to parse the cases D, E, and F, identify links to case X, and add little hyperlinks. What do we mean, therefore, by noting up the case is that when you go on CanLII, let's say you're searching information about copyright law, you stumble upon a CCH case from the Supreme Court in 2004, and you want to know what happened with the CCH case when it was discussed in later decisions that are available in the CanLII collection. So you would go, whenever you go on CanLII and you find a decision, you have these tabs at the top and they give you this information. So the tab at the right, cited by, is basically cases D, E, and F in our example from the previous slide, i.e. the cases that cite the CCH decision. Cases A, B, and C are the ones that we would find in the cited documents. So in that case, we can see from the number in the tab itself that CCH includes 24 citations. Could be cases, could be legislation in that case. So I wouldn't know by heart just by looking at this how many cases exactly were cited, but I suppose maybe 20 or something just from this figure. So this is one part where you can see you can do a Noteup on CanLII. The other place where you can do that is directly through the search engine. If you happen to know the title or the reference of a case in the CanLII collection, you can use that field. And you would enter the reference to CCH, copy paste it, or enter the title, CCH something, and the next field you would have is a list of decisions issued after CCH that cite the CCH decision. So today we're talking about an improved citator and what does it mean? So for the purpose of today's discussion, we don't really care about that side of the story. We want to see, the citator's job in that case for the purpose of today's presentation is to understand and improve how we display the information on CanLII about how case X was cited in later cases. So the cases D, E, and F. And what this thing could entail is probably to do a better sort of the cases that cite case X, because the let's say case D only mentions case X very in just a footnote. It's likely of lesser importance to the user than case F in the event that case F is a very long discussion of case X. So you want to try to help the user and bump case F up. You want to also pay attention to perhaps a qualification of the nature of the treatment between case F and case X, or case E, and so on and so forth. So either to display this information to the user, let's say case F is a critic of case X, well, either you want to display this information to the users of your site, or you want this information to be included in the algorithm that you use to sort the cases in the first place. So it's a reasonable assumption to think that if there's a big critic of case X and case F, you want to pop this up first. And if case D happens to just adopt the reasoning in case D, even though it can discuss case X at length in case D, well, it's a little bit less dangerous, if you will, for the users not to immediately be directed to case D, because at least you can use case X and not read case D, and you likely won't do a mistake in law or like miss something that's important and that changes how case X is going to be perceived in terms of its persuasiveness. So this is what this is what the feature that has been deployed on CanLII in January and that we continue to build upon tries to do, improve that using these kind of things, sort and pay attention to the nature of the relationship. The challenge is that these kind of features, they exist in your commercial search engine already. They're a staple of such things. Our users on CanLII, when they fill out surveys to ask us, you see, my daughter is curious about Caselaw today. You want to say hi? No? And so the commercial services, they do have this. It's a staple of their services, but they have been building these features historically using human editors. I suspect that today they probably have some kind of algorithmic approach to the way they at least identify those cases that they need to pay attention to from an editorial standpoint. But CanLII starts from scratch, never having tried ever to qualify these relationships. We have 2.5 and even more than that now million cases on CanLII, and amongst these cases, there are 500,000 that have been cited by other decisions. It's just an impossible task to go back with human editors and to try to do it. So whatever we did, we needed to first assess whether a entirely programmatic approach to building an improved citator would work. And so before we dig into and show you the feature, how it works, and get to the most interesting part of the presentation, which is what Frédéric is going to say, I just want to talk about the hypothesis that we had to say leading up to building that thing and investing in building that thing. Should we even do it? And if so, what would be the specifications of the thing we would build? The first one of these hypotheses is that the existing systems, and not like, I mean, it's not really important, but in Canada, the usual players, LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, and nothing of what I say here is critical of their approach to doing this. It's just different. So these systems, they don't always agree one with the other as for the qualification that they assign to a particular relationship between two cases, and they're not free of error, which is fine. Any single thing that involves a large volume of document and human processing or algorithmic processing, there's going to be error. So it's not a big thing just to say that. It's not a rousing critic. The thing is that if they always agreed one with the other, and if they were completely free of errors, the bar would have been so high that we would have said, well, trying to emulate this using an entirely programmatic approach probably wouldn't meet the threshold for this feature to be appreciated by the user. Clearly, there is a science, an exact science to assigning these editorial treatment that would be hard to match unless we use human editors and we do it the exact same ways as these companies have been doing it. But the fact that they don't always agree with one with the other and they're not free of error leaves some room for us. So one hurdle in our mental process into building that thing is like, okay, there was probably room for us to do something. And you don't have to take my word for the fact that they don't always agree together. There are a few papers on citators. This one is based on, I think all of them discuss US law and the way they deal with US law, but you can assume that it's roughly the same thing. It's the same players that the ones we have in Canada from amongst the commercial services. And I just took the juiciest quote in the paper that says that in a sample of 116 cases, only 26% of the time, the two leading products agreed. And then you have to read the rest of the paper, and the author says, well, this quote is a little bit misleading because it doesn't mean that they completely disagree about the nature of the treatment. The reason why firsthand, when you look at the data, they don't seem to agree is because they use a different approach. They don't have the same vocabulary or nomenclature to identify the different types of editorial treatment that can qualify a relationship. And therefore, they don't agree. So again, it's good news for us because that means that there's room for another approach that coexists with these approaches that are already different in the market. So one hurdle less towards deciding that we would invest money in building this thing. Another hypothesis that we have is that users will, or at least should, always make their own minds about the nature of a relationship. So if you're reading case X and you're ready to take it and bring it to court as an authority in support of your argument, like, it would be quite dangerous to just rely on the little symbols or whatever editorial treatment has been assigned by your favorite legal research provider. You should make your own mind. It's a minefield if you just go and rely entirely on other people's opinion. I would say that you're probably not doing your job the right way. In the paper that I just showed you, they say that actually users, they unfortunately rely a little bit too much on this according to surveys, but our hypothesis is that they should make their own mind about this. And we should empower them to make their own mind, as opposed to trying to substitute ourselves to their own decision-making process and try to give them all of the information by making editorial calls. So one of the goals that we thought, one of the foundations on which we wanted to build this engine was to say, instead of substituting ourselves and making all the editorial calls, we're going to empower the users. And I'll show you how we do it. CanLII has a large group of non-professional users. This is another, it's not an hypothesis, it's a fact. And what it means is that when you have a system that's for use by professionals that are very expensive, so there are probably no members of the public who register to any of these commercial services, and that's fine. So that means that they have a very specific clientele that they can talk to. And so they develop these very granular set of labels, like a decision can be affirmed, overturned, distinguish, and all of this. It can be hard to figure out if you're a non-professional users. And sometimes they use a very large set of symbols that are different. And if you don't know exactly what one symbol means, you might probably miss important information. And just as an example of that, let's say our hypothetical case X, the first few paragraphs in the decision, it says, well, from a procedural standpoint, the plaintiff is right. The plaintiff used the right type of motion to bring, to file its claim with the court, but the claim is ill-founded, so the motion is denied. So two separate discussion, one procedural, one on the merits of the decision, as is the case in many, many cases in case law, as any practitioner would know. You may very well have a decision, let's say case D, that is critical of case X about its decision that was made on the merits. And you can still have cases issued after case D that continue to cite case X for the procedural discussion. The procedural discussion still stands. It's still good law, whereas whatever the judge said on the merits of the decision has been criticized, has been overturned in case D, but it continues to be cited. So what kind of symbols do you add to this? And how, if you're a non-professional user, do you interpret these symbols? Would you assign a little green dot, for example, to say, well, it continues to be cited, so I mean, you know, that deserves a green dot? Or are you more prudent by saying, no, this has been overturned? In which case, if you're a legal researcher, especially one that's not so sophisticated, member of the public, trying to find answers to legal questions, you may miss the procedural discussion in case X because you will ignore it thinking that it's no longer cited, whereas it's still cited, at least for part of the discussion. Or you go with just a cautionary notion or a symbol that indicates something is wrong, in which case, how are you really helping a non-sophisticated user in that case? So we didn't think, I don't know, ultimately the final version of that product and 5 years down the road at CanLII, if it will have symbol, I don't know, but we didn't necessarily feel as the first step towards building that thing needed to include or emulate the same approach that has been taken in commercial services. To finish with the hypothesis, so we ended up thinking that we could come close to, if not match, the value provided by existing system with an approach that seeks to give a heads up to the user and say, hey, you might want to read that case. We're not going to exactly tell you or try to qualify the relationship, but you might want to read that first because it seems to contain a very important discussion about case X. And the core of the engine that powers that is the discussion intensity indicator. And Frédéric will give you more information about exactly what does that mean. So our solution for now, the one that's been deployed on CanLII in January of this year, and that again, we're going to continue to build on, and Frédéric will tell you a little bit about what we're doing this year to improve it further, is a system that for now sorts cases that cite a given case X in decreasing order of discussion intensity. That's a key metric here. Provides a preview or a snippet of the citing cases that gives the user. So it's the idea of empowerment. We're trying to help the user make their own call about what's happening in a case F that cites our hypothetical case X. Oh, here's a little bit of barking for you. Sorry. And the last thing is that we want to provide the users with the metrics. So not only does the discussion intensity score is used to feed our sorting algorithm, but it's also going to be displayed on the site. And what does this mean? That's the before and after. Sorry if the screenshot is a little bit blurry. I took this before we launched a new version of the Citator, and for some reason I just took too small of a screenshot, so I had to increase it a little bit, so it's blurry. Sorry for that. So you will recognize that field that I showed you early in the presentation, where we're trying to use that field to note up something. I'm noting up the Sue Rodriguez decision from BC, the one issued in the 1990s about physician-assisted suicide. In the Rodriguez case, the Supreme Court of Canada said at the time, it's illegal. So basically the right to end of life is a notion that was rejected at the time. It's criminal to try for a doctor to help somebody take his or her own life because of suffering or whatever. So the Rodriguez case stands for a long time. I'm trying to note up and understand if it's still good law in Canada. I'm using the old version of CanLII, and there are 490, almost 500 cases that cite the Rodriguez decision. And in all of these cases, the first one that appears here is a Winco decision, and the second one is a O'Connor decision. Well, the Rodriguez case, not so long ago, in 2015, I think, was overturned in a decision of the Supreme Court in Canada in Carter. So Carter, if you know just a little bit about this topic, you would expect Carter to be the first results, not Winco, not O'Connor, whatever they actually use Rodriguez for, I don't know. And you'll notice that the snippet doesn't tell you much either. So it looks like I've been very critical of the way it's been done on CanLII so far. That's fine. It's just that we haven't improved that particular feature. It's a lot of work, and it's difficult to come up with a good citator that identify all of these citations and gets you a list of all the decisions that cite a given decision. It's a tremendous improvement versus the way legal research was done 30 years ago, for instance. So don't feel like I'm being critical. I'm just saying this is the before. So we improved upon that. So you can see that the sorting algorithm, it was basically the same kind of algorithm that we used to sort by relevance. So not something that was specifically adapted for a Noteup feature. So this is why Winco comes up first. Whereas intuitively, if you know just a little bit about Rodriguez and Carter, you would expect the Carter cases to come up first. And the snippets here, they don't help you understand why Winco is there first instead. So what you would see if you use CanLII today, you note up the Rodriguez decision. Well, first of all, you have the Carter cases first. So the first one that we display is the BC Supreme Court decision, because if you look, it's a 500 pages document, like 488 pages. It contains a very lengthy discussion of Rodriguez. So this is why it's higher even in the ranking than the Supreme Court decision that actually overturns. The Supreme Court is sort of tricky. They don't like to say that they overturned their own decision. So in that case, the summary says that it only distinguishes Carter, any single practitioner. And if you read blogs about Carter and Rodriguez, it's just say Carter overturned completely Rodriguez. So the Supreme Court is just overly prudent in the way they qualify their own decisions in the headnotes. So logically, finally, the Carter cases have been brought up in the search engine, and they're the first thing we signal to the users. You should read Carter. Better sort. Better snippets. So if you look at the snippets, instead of merely putting in bold the reference to the Rodriguez decision, you can see that if you just look at the snippet, you understand that there's a critic here. It's distinguishable from Rodriguez. So clearly the court in Carter at the BC level is moving away from Rodriguez. And you can see from reading the snippet below the Supreme Court decision, and I'm pointing at my own screen, it's absolutely not useful for you, so I'll stop doing that. So the Supreme Court decision or snippet tells you what's happened. It's not just a bunch of numbers and citation that appears in the snippet. So much more useful to empower the user to make a decision about what's happening in the Carter cases that is relevant for the Rodriguez decision. And the last thing, as you can see, we developed the jalapeno metric that Frédéric is going to discuss, which is a reflection of the decision intensity score. And the one thing we didn't want to do is just provide the actual metric to the user, because as we improve the algorithm, that metric can fluctuate. And we didn't want to end up having to understand to the users, oh, it dropped by 5 points. It used to be 201 and now it's like whatever, 190. Instead, what happened, and then if you're a practitioner and you rely a lot on that, you're sort of nervous that you missed something. So we think that opacity is a little bit more useful here than the actual number that we have in our own database. So the jalapeno score, 5 jalapenos means it's the spiciest discussion you can have. So it's the highest ranking. We don't go further than that. So we tell you that there is a very lengthy discussion of Rodriguez happening in the BC case. And, you know, it's only 4 jalapenos in the Supreme Court case, but it's also one of the highest marks you can get when you get 4 of these here. So if you use CanLII today, this is what you're going to see. And Frédéric is going to be the one opening the hood and showing you all the plumbing and how we did it. So Frédéric, up to you. I don't know, Leila, if you need to do anything to switch, pass the mic to Frédéric, but I'm done here.
You can just like stop the like the screen, but it's okay. Frédéric, to you.
Stop share. Here we go.
Exactly. Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Xavier. I think, do you see my under the hood slide?
Yes, it's working.
Okay, fine. I got it the first time. Didn't expect that. Okay, so thanks, Xavier. Now my mandate is to, like Xavier said, just provide you with an overview of how we did this enhanced Noteup feature. Of course, I also have the mandate to prove you that my part is more interesting than Xavier's. So I'll let you judge this after I'm done. We will going to process in three parts. So just let me. Okay. First part will describe how we had to improve CanLII's Citator to provide this feature. So this is a step that was not really visible to the user, except for a few enhancements that we won't talk about today, but it relates to pinpoint paragraphs and things like that. But I'll describe how we had to improve CanLII Citator first, and then I'll show you how we identified and parsed discussion markers. And finally, I will show you a little bit of our ponderation process to establish these well appreciated hotness levels. So let's start with perfecting reflex. The gist of our of this step was to try to identify all occurrences of a case name as it might be referred to by a short form or what we dubbed aliases. So, for example, Oaks is an alias for the Oaks decision, R versus Oaks. Moj is an alias for Moj versus Moj, and so on and so forth. So everybody knows that a judge or even lawyers refer to decisions by their short forms all the time. And when a decision is discussed, like in this example, the judge might first cite the decision with its full citation, and in the past we put links towards these decisions when we had the full citations, and it was rather it presents some challenges right there, but it was rather easy after 10 years of experience with that. but now we had to find all these other references to the same decision using a shorthand, like in this case for R versus WD. The judge simply uses WD. So we had to identify every occurrences of this decision in the citing decision. The next step, once we consider that we have reached a good level of identifying all short forms, would be to find what are discussion markers that are available near each of those aliases, just to indicate which decisions are discussed as opposed to only cited. So, so the challenge is to find all occurrences which collectively provide us with hints that the decision was not only referred to, but also analyzed and discussed. There are two types of these kind of markers. First, judicial history markers. I listed a few here with a kind of annotation that might be familiar with those practicing regex, regular expression programming. So words like affirming, affirmed, following, followed, etc. These are often found in footnotes or endnotes of judgments. Judicial history markers are heavily standardized by legal style writing guides. And as you can see, there are some peculiar abbreviations that can be found in these kind of markers. So for varying, it's VAR apostrophe G, things like that. The second set of discussion markers would be case treatment markers. These are generally statements made by the citing judge in his reasons. It's less standardized, of course. There are plenty of different expressions, a lot of variations in this. And sometimes it's quite neutral, like in Jordan. When a judge says in and then refers to a decision, it signals that he's going to discuss something about this decision. It's not merely a footnote or a mere citation. So this is considered to be a treatment marker, although a weak treatment marker. Stronger treatment markers are the court is bound by, or this case is no longer good law. So things like that are stronger markers. So as I said, we did this. In fact, we parsed all those markers with regular expressions. So these regular expressions can be quite complex, and we continue to build upon what we are constantly finding in decisions. So this is a work in progress. We've reached a very good level of detection of these markers, but as you can imagine, it's always evolving. Some of the variations that can be detected are illustrated in this page. As you can see, there are lots of different ways judges express themselves about decisions, and these variations, and as we detect them, this allows us to as Xavier illustrated a few minutes ago, to highlight some snippets in your search results. So when you are ranking the decisions with our Noteup feature, then the small excerpts show you some of the wording that we found in these the citing decisions that are indicative of a discussion. How did we manage to elaborate our system? We devised 8 different levels of discussion markers. In fact, besides these discussion markers, there are a zero level or ground zero level where there's no discussion. This is assigned to reference citations that are mere footnote mentions or mere citations without any wording that denotes an analysis or a discussion. 8 at the opposite would be a very strong wording like a negative history or negative treatment. This can be illustrated by a spectrum from, let's say, footnote citation would be 0, and 1 would be, let's say the word is like C, and then the footnote citation would be a very low indicator of a discussion because C denotes some kind of a discussion, but not very strong. And at the opposite of the spectrum, you would find language such as is no longer good law, which clearly states that this is a negative treatment. Of course, there must be some caveats in assessing these kind of occurrences, because you can have a sentence that says that has 2 negatives, like I don't agree that Dominion Canners is no longer good law. So this would be a false positive. So we have to take this into consideration in the system. We devised, based on these levels of discussion markers, an aggregate score system. Each level is assigned a certain weight. Let's say a positive language with respect to treatment would be assigned, let's say, 15 points, and a negative treatment would be assigned 25 points, something like that, just to give some weight to different categories of discussion markers. And then occurrences of the markers within a citing decision are added up, and this yields a discussion score. I have here an illustration of our development tool in development environment where we try to assess what would be the discussion score for a given decision when we assign different ways to different levels of discussion. Here you see that the first result for this decision would have a discussion score of 120, because there were like 24 neutral type markers in the decision. So there were many discussion markers, but each discussion markers has a low score. At the opposite, the next one has a discussion score of 94, but there was like one negative marker that was found once in the document, but this occurrence boosted the score by 25 points alone. So you see that we can, these by the way, are not the actual ways that are currently deployed on CanLII, but I just wanted to show you how we manage to weigh and to assess what should be the proper ponderation for our system. Of course, we benchmarked several combination of ponderation, so we were able to test based on known cases which weighting was going to yield the best results. Of course, this allowed us, as Xavier showed you, to display hotness thresholds from 1 to 5 jalapenos, just to provide you with an idea of the distribution of these levels on the CanLII website currently. We estimate that around half of cited decisions on CanLII are somewhat discussed, meaning that around half of cited decisions, Xavier told you that there are about 500,000 cited decisions on CanLII. So about half of that, so around 250,000 cited decisions are discussed in one or discussed at the first, or either at the first or at the most intense level, and only 300 or so decisions reach the highest discussion level, which is 5 jalapenos. So this is the distribution of these jalapenos between 1 and 5 has reached a good balance. But of course, we constantly improve the way we are parsing decisions and the way we are balancing these weights to be able to reach a good level of accuracy. What's next? Of course, we will eventually support legislative discussions and treatment. This will, it's not actually planned, but it will come because it's so obvious that it needs to be done. There will be further exploitation of judicial history markers, those markers that are highly standardized and which establish without any ambiguity links between two decisions that are part of the same case. So we will further exploit these judicial history markers to be able to automate to a certain extent judicial history of decisions. So this is not relevant to the Noteup feature, but this is a side benefit of this activity. And finally, we will probably, as Xavier said, it's not really certain how we will do it, but we will probably identify mentions denoting more specific treatment, such as cautionary or negative treatment. Again, we don't know exactly how we will provide users with this kind of hint, because as it's an automated system, this must be really, we must be careful in the way we are providing the information to the users, but the spirit will remain the same. We will provide users with means to be able to make their own ideas about how they can use this particular decision that is cited by others. So this concludes my part of the presentation.
So thank you very much for this interesting presentation, Xavier and Frederic. So we have some questions by the audience. One question about, will we have access to the PowerPoint? I will just want to remind that this webinar is recorded, and you will find the video of the webinar on our website by the end of the day, as well as the PowerPoint that have been presented during this webinar. Like, one of the questions is, how long does it take to make such improvement on CanLII?
Uh, I'm not sure. Maybe that question I'm not sure I understand the question. How long does it take? Yeah, I assume if I'm correct in interpreting the question, I assume this means how long it took for us to build it. Frédéric, would you say it's like a
I,
year's work, but there was a
it's,
lot of preliminary thinking, observation,
yeah.
tinkering, so that we could sort of make up our minds. So leading up to the time that we actually said, okay, we're building this, we're investing, there was a lot of sort of underground thinking. We're all people who are big fans of legal information and legal text. So this is the kind of thing that we've been thinking about for a long time. The actual building, once we start doing it, Frédéric, a year?
Maybe, but it's hard to assess how many full-time equivalent were assigned to it. But it takes time to do it, but it takes time to think about it and change our minds. And it's when we decided to do it, it was I think that from the moment we decided to actually do it and the moment it was released, it's about a year, but it's not like we did several other things besides that. So it's not a full-time year, and it's not all the the IT members were involved in that at the same time. So it's hard to really estimate the effort that went into it, but it took about a year to deploy and to develop and deploy.
There was a question in writing just before that, and I sort of, since Leila was concluding the PowerPoint, the presentation, I was just typing very fast. There was a question about when will this feature be available on CanLII? The one that we discussed for most of the presentation is already there. It was deployed in January. So if you note up a case today, as I showed you, all the screenshots from my presentation is stuff that is currently live on the CanLII website. So you will see the jalapenos. So hope you enjoyed the feature. There's always a little survey form on the right corner. So if after this presentation you decide to tinker with it, by all means, I hope you find it useful, and don't hesitate to provide feedback. It's there. So the only thing that's not live is the stuff that was in the last slide of Frédéric's presentation, where he sort of gave us a hint of the stuff we're working on now and we're trying to head. This is not live now. There's probably, I think Frédéric is reasonable to expect that in a year from now there's going to be sort of the second phase.
Yeah.
So
yeah, up to a year, but maybe less than that. I'm not sure about it really, but yeah, it's this
but
ballpark, yeah.
98% of what we discussed today is live on the website today.
And to answer a written question from Mr. Westerman,
yes.
He says, do you think the way the relevancy score is determined will have an effect on which cases are likely to be cited in the future, thereby shaping the law? In fact, I think so, because of course it's the sorting is so different from what it was before. Now you can have the hottest citing cases in the first 10 results, and so you don't have to go that far to find what is really the most relevant citing decisions. So I would believe that it can change the way lawyers find their authorities. Of course, it's quite difficult to measure. I haven't think of any way of measuring it, but I believe it will change things.
So the question by Thomas Vasquez is whether there is any discussion on adding explanation to every type of discussion of a case, overruling, overturning, distinguishing means from non-professionals. And I can say that historically, even though CanLII has a large base of users that are non-professionals, it's in most of the decisions historically about how to develop the features and the interface have been targeted towards building it for a professional audience. Doesn't mean that, and Frédéric could tell you much more about it perhaps in another webinar, but historically, the Lexim team, when they were building CanLII, they made choices to choose simpler interfaces than commercial products. So some people, so certainly this was helpful to non-professionals, but at the time, every single type of interfaces in the world were being simplified. So people were starting to use Google as a search engine for their general purpose research, as opposed to these large repository that you need to navigate from one link to the other that we used to have in the 1990s. So they made a lot of choices that may seem like they were for non-professional users, whereas they benefited just about everybody. So, and right now we in our sort of strategic objectives, we're trying to benchmark where CanLII is in terms of what does it do for non-professional users and how we can improve it. So while there is currently, well, we don't even have these labels appearing on a website. Like, we don't assign an editorial treatment. We don't say it's been overruled, overturned. So I don't know how we would do it today to try to explain these different qualifiers, but down the road, every single thing on CanLII will be assessed to see where can we do a better job. Not to say that we didn't do a good job, it just wasn't necessarily their focus. It's really hard to focus for a professional audience at the same time as you build it for non-professional users. It's a good question in due course. Yeah. My hunch as to how the feature will evolve is that there will be more visualization, again, in the spirit of trying to empower the users and help them make their own minds about the nature of the relationship, as opposed to going there and editorially assign labels. And editorially, I mean either through human qualification, which likely won't happen, or because algorithmically we will say, well, this is an overturning. So I'm not sure if that specific thing will ever be explained on CanLII itself, but maybe.
If I may just add, our approach is not going in that direction of trying to emulate other commercial systems with respect to their granular assignment of treatment. But we strive to provide our users with commentary content which might explain these kind of things. Let's say someone explains the issue with respect to how the Supreme Court addressed his dissenting, between quotes, approach with respect in Carter with respect to Rodriguez. Then this could be a CanLII Connects. There could be a CanLII Connects text which explains just that, and this CanLII Connects text would be linked with the Carter and maybe Rodriguez decisions. So this would be the way these kind of things would be explained, but the interface would still remain as simple as possible, because laypersons and professional users don't need cluttered interfaces with functionalities that are hard to understand and to use. So this would not be our approach to add these kind of granular treatments.
Adam asking if a case has more than one decision, is there a way to discuss citation based on finding?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If a case is more than one decision, maybe, what do you think, Frédéric? Maybe Adam, if you can chime in and just to specify your question, that would be helpful.
I'm not
Frédéric,
sure I
what do you think?
understand the question.
I can jump to Charles Côté's questions in the meantime. Maybe if Adam, you can take just a few minutes to type more to explain what you mean. Charles Côté's question is, are we thinking of adding a continuous oversight of a given targeted decision? Let's say a target WD, and later the Alberta Court of Appeal. And indeed, you're right, it's been, WD has been quite criticized in Alberta these days. With a powerful discussion, I would be notified. This is the kind of stuff. So if you're a user of Lexbox on CanLII, which is, it's not really a plugin because you don't need to download anything. It used to be, but now it's directly within the interface. You create an account. If you're a user of Lexbox, right now you can create a bunch of alerts based on keywords. It is indeed envisioned, and in relatively short term, that this system that we described today would be used to generate alerts. So I can imagine that relatively soon through Lexbox, you would be able to set up an alert and say, this case, WD, is so fundamental to my practice that I want to get a notification whenever there's a powerful or a jalapeno-filled discussion of WD. Yes, it's dans les cartons, I think, at Lexham at least.
For example, if it's a case at the labor board for overtime, forced unpaid breaks and vacation time, but I'm only interested in dealing with unpaid breaks.
I'd say it would combine a Noteup search with keywords. If I understand the question, so yeah.
Sorry, I want to interrupt. One thing that do I have still time to share my screen to answer this particular question?
Yes, of course, you can do it.
Okay. One thing that we developed at the same time, even though it's not exactly the same feature, but it builds upon what Frédéric discussed. So when we improved the way we identify short names of decisions, so WD when it's there, it was also useful in building another feature on the website, which I think will be useful to answer Adam's question. So let's say I take one of my favorite case, the CCH decision. Leila, Frédéric, you're seeing my screen, right?
Yep.
Exactly, yes.
So one thing you may not have noticed on the right side of the screen, and I'm not so experimented with annotations on Zoom. Is there a little pen? Yes, there is. But anyways, on the right side of the screen here, you can see the little thing that looks like a DNA sample, basically. Well, this is useful so you can browse to the specific paragraphs of the decision right away. So what you would be able to say is that, let's say this paragraph discusses one concept. Well, right now on CanLII, and this has been deployed on CanLII at the same time as the entire Noteup feature, even though we didn't talk about it at all today. But whenever you're noting up, at least through this, you have also a much more granular Noteup feature, the bare bones version of it, where you can say, I want to look at all the decisions that cite only this paragraph of CCH. So you can see my screen here, where every single time the paragraph 8 from CCH has been cited. So you don't have, when you go into that particular screen, you don't see the jalapeno system because it's focused on one paragraph only. But at least if you combine the Noteup with that feature, you have a good idea of where the critic comes from. So, and the same way, if I'm actually noting up CCH, and I go into the York decision, the first one that appears here, I can know pretty quickly using that tool. And maybe this is the first thing I should have shown you in the first place. I'm not sure why it looks like a bad example. I'm not sure why, Frédéric, maybe you know. The paragraphs don't appear. Maybe that's because I didn't load the decision itself, but the
not sure why.
Anyways, technical glitch, a bug to report. Let's say I take the second one then.
Is it the paragraph are numbered?
Then you see it. Okay, so oh, maybe that's because they're not numbered. Anyways,
yeah, because, yeah.
Okay, there's no paragraph numbering, but there isn't that one. So using this, you can see with the little DNA bar here, when you note up and then you click on this decision, York, because it discusses CCH, well, you can go right away to the most important paragraphs of York. So you can understand very quickly what York is about. And if York stands for the fact that CCH has been overturned, well, you would know right away, what does it say? So I don't know if that's clear. Maybe you need to try to use it and combine the two features whenever you do to understand what I mean. I'm not sure this is the right way to present it. But in my own experience, testing the jalapeno system we presented today and everything that it entails in terms of sort and snippet, when you combine it with that feature that I just show you, you can very quickly get to what a case is about. So you would know if it's been overturned because of a procedural element or because if it's been discussed on the merit, or I don't remember the example that Adam used in how he very usefully, by the way, specified his question. But labor law decision to discuss one thing and another thing. Well, using this, and you have to try it to understand, I think that would do a fairly good job at doing what you want to do. Okay, so Adam understood.
If there is no other question, I would like, first of all, to thank our panelists who took the time to accept our invitation. Thank you very much. We have had a very interesting and enriching discussion. So thank you, Xavier and Frédéric, for today. I would also like to thank the audience for their participation. There is other upcoming event this week, notably tomorrow webinar, Clio Direct to Public Guided Pathway for Power of Attorney. We hope to see many of you there. So I would suggest you to check out our website at cyberjustice.ca. Until then, please take care of yourself, and thank you very much.